I guess now I should actually talk about the angle shooter or the line marker. I prefer line marker. Like I said on Twitter, I don't know why the name is so stupid. I like it. I think it's a good solution to solving a problem with the subs in Splatoon. And that is, Splatoon has a lot of bombs and very little utility subs. And the utility subs are not seen as good because they don't do damage. Right now, you have things like, well, point sensor, beacon, and toxic mist. All three of those do no damage. It was similar in Splatoon 1. You had the beacon, you had point sensor, you had disruptor. Though disruptor did emotional damage, so it still did some damage. But Splatoon has the utility subs they want people to use, but the utility subs themselves don't provide a whole lot of value because bombs are more valuable than anything else. So I think by addressing that, by making the line marker a replacement to the point sensor that also supplies damage, I think is a good way to fix that. If they were to address all the other utility subs by making them at least somewhat useful outside of being a utility and still having some impact overall, that would be a good way to fix it. Right now, like I said, utility subs aren't seen as very useful because people value damage. So the fact that the line marker is going to deal some sort of damage while also doing having the same effect as a point sensor is good. I think that's actually really smartly designed because now you have this sub that has existed since the beginning of time, but now has a new function and does what people want it to do. It supplies damage. The only thing that we don't really know is how much damage it does. How effective is it? If it's a ton of damage, which we don't think it is just by looking at the footage we have, it doesn't look like it deals a ton of damage, which is fine. It doesn't have to, but it provides that damage to something that didn't have damage before. So I would like to see the other utility subs addressed in a similar fashion. I don't expect them to do things like make beacon do damage. I think that's a much. But to address utility subs not serving a greater function would be good. Overall, I would like to see more changes to utility subs. But anyway, I do like the angle shooter, the line marker. I think it's a good way of giving some value to a utility sub that is outside just its core usefulness. I think that's a similar way as to why they made ink mines mark people now, is so that it still has some inherent value after it's been used. Ink mine in Splatoon 1 could kill. It wouldn't do it very often, but it could kill by itself. But if somebody set off an ink mine, then that was it. Ink mine went off and everyone went on about their day. At least now, with it marking people, there is still some value. If somebody were to trip your ink mine, you would instantly know, and you would instantly know who. I think that was a good change. And it seems like they're trying to continue a similar way of addressing subs that people have deemed not very good by giving them more than one use. And I think it's also why they did stuff like allow beacons to see people that were by them. That was also a welcome change. That way you would know if a beacon was safe. By addressing things like that, by giving subs more functions, is good. Now, what other things would I like to see them do? If they're going to bring back Toxic Mist or Disruptor or whatever again, I would like whatever they bring to just have it have a lingering effect again. There's no way to follow up on it as it stands. Only certain weapons can follow up on it, and that's not a large list. I think they didn't quite understand its usefulness and how good, like what made it good in Splatoon 1. They just know it was really good in Splatoon 1, and that players loved it, and that was it. So I'd like to see them have a lingering effect for Disruptor, Toxic Mist, whatever they decide to bring. Beacons, I don't think need to have anything else done to them, really. I think beacons are fine as is. If they function the same way in Splatoon 3 as they do right now, I think they're fine. Beacons don't need to be super good because they bring value on any team. Beacons are almost always valuable no matter what. But things like toxic mist and point sensors haven't always had the same sort of treatment. They haven't always had the same amount of definite usefulness. So I think beacons are fine. I think point sensor was probably the one of the ones that needed to be addressed the most because of its value decreasing so much. Also the fact that I don't think they realized that people don't care about being marked as much as they once did. People used to care a lot about being marked on the map, but now it's so, like, most players don't care that they've been marked anymore. It was a big problem for a while in Splatoon 1. That was why people ran cold-blooded all the time, was people were afraid of being marked with echolocator. But as time went on, people just stopped caring about being marked. And so a sub like point sensor that doesn't do any damage and only exists to... Oh, I had something worse than a roll-only ink brush. Something that only exists to provide marks in a scene that no longer cares that they've been marked just holds no value. If this was still early Splatoon 1, then sure, whatever. But nobody cares if they've been marked by a point sensor anymore. Nobody cares that you can see where they're at because the way that people play is so drastically different that people are more confident in their play. If someone is marked, they don't care. They will still just actively go into people. And I think Nintendo realized now that people don't care. They had to even take Cold-Blooded and mash it with another sub because nobody cared. The reason they made the change was because nobody was actually using Cold-Blooded, so they had to change its purpose into something else. And I think now they are, with Splatoon 3, they realized that people don't care about being marked. And the best way to then address that nobody cares is to give it a different function. So basically, I think the angle shooter line marker is going to be good. I think it's a well-designed adjustment to point sensor, and it shows that they're in a right direction to address these sorts of subs that aren't bad, but need some sort of thing to make them actually worth using. Nobody cares about being marked anymore, so point sensor is inherently devalued because nobody cares. That also, like, some people, well, most people actually will have some form of cold-blooded on them anyway with sub-defense. So it just doesn't matter. So giving a point sensor a new function with the fact that it can now ricochet and then deal damage is a good way to address the fact that its usefulness has declined. I'd like to see them adjust Toxic Mist to make it closer in line with Disruptor, though I would imagine they probably either wouldn't do that or Toxic Mist in general isn't coming back. Because if they shift it closer to Disruptor, it could be problematic because of how oppressive Disruptor got. I would like to see them address other subs like this. I think this is a good direction with the line marker. I think they're doing a good job. I'm curious to see how exactly far it goes, how many times it can bounce, and then the actual amount of damage it does. Because it could be enough to break some limits when it comes to damage. If it does like minimal damage, even that's fine for some weapons. Like if they did only like 5 damage, that's still enough for some weapons in this game. It would be interesting to see how it actually plays.